The Wyoming grassland stretched endlessly beneath a sky the color of old blood, where smoke still lingered from fires that had consumed more than timber and hay. They had devoured dreams. It was 1878, not 1798, in a territory where the law moved slower than drought and justice wore spurs that rarely rode in favor of widows. Sarah Mackenzie stood before the charred remains of what had been her life, her calloused hands gripping her daughter's small shoulders. The child, Emma, barely 5 years old, clung to her mother's worn skirt, her face smudged with ash and tears. Around them lay the skeleton of their ranch, blackened beams jutting from the earth like broken ribs, the acrid smell of destruction hanging thick in the autumn air. "Mama, where will we sleep?" Emma's voice was small, frightened. Sarah's jaw tightened. She was 32 years old, her body bearing the marks of childbirth and years of ranch work. Strong arms, broad shoulders, hands that could birth a calf or mend a fence with equal skill. The townspeople whispered about her weight, about how she'd let herself go after Thomas died, as if grief and hard labor were supposed to make a woman decorative rather than durable. "We'll sleep in the lean-to by the creek tonight, sweet girl," Sarah said, her voice steadier than her heart. "Tomorrow we'll start rebuilding." But tomorrow brought something worse than ruins. Clement Baxter arrived on a steel-gray gelding that cost more than most families earned in a year. He was a man who wore his wealth like armor. Tailored vest, polished boots, a silver-handled riding crop he tapped against his thigh as he surveyed Sarah's devastation with eyes that glittered with satisfaction rather than sympathy. "Mrs. Mackenzie?" He didn't dismount, towering above her on horseback. "Terrible tragedy what happened here." Sarah looked up at him, shielding her eyes from the noon sun. "It was no tragedy, Mr. Baxter. It was arson. Your fire jumped the creek." Baxter's laugh was sharp as barbed wire. Now, can't control wildfire. Nature does as she pleases." He leaned forward in his saddle, his smile predatory. "But I'm a reasonable man. I know you're in a difficult position, a woman alone, a child to feed, winter coming. I'll buy this land from you. $500. That's generous for burned ground." "This land is worth $3,000, and you know it," Sarah said quietly. "The house and barn can be rebuilt. The pasture will recover." "The bank holds your note, Mrs. Mackenzie. $2,000 due in 3 months. You've got no cattle left to sell, no crops to harvest. How exactly do you plan to pay?" Baxter's voice dripped false concern. "I'm offering you a way out. Take it before you have nothing." Sarah's hands curled into fists at her sides. "This ranch has the only reliable water source for 15 miles. Thomas died finding that spring, drilling through bedrock for months. I'm not selling his legacy for a fraction of its worth." Baxter's expression hardened. "You've got until Monday to reconsider. After that, I'll be making my offer to the bank directly." He wheeled his horse around, calling back over his shoulder, "And Mrs. Mackenzie, don't expect charity from town. Nobody's got time for stubborn women who don't know their place." Emma emerged from behind a pile of salvage tools. "Mama, what's he mean?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "He means he thinks we'll give up. But we won't, will we?" Emma shook her head fiercely, though her eyes were uncertain. The days that followed tested Sarah in ways the fire never had. She rose before dawn, her back aching from sleeping on the hard ground of the lean-to, and worked until darkness forced her to stop. There was so much to salvage: nails from charred wood, tools buried in ash, fence posts that might still hold a wire. She hitched their 2 remaining cows, bony creatures that had somehow escaped the flames, to a makeshift sledge and hauled loads of burnable wood to town. Mrs. Henderson at the general store bought it for pennies. Her lips pursed in disapproval. "Sarah, you know I'm sympathetic to your situation," Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But people are talking. A woman in your condition trying to run a ranch alone? It's not proper. Perhaps you should consider Mr. Baxter's offer." "My condition?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. Mrs. Henderson flushed. "Well, dear, you're not exactly, without a husband and with your figure. It's hard for a woman to attract proper help or protection." Sarah loaded her meager payment into her pocket and walked out without another word, her face burning with humiliation and rage. The money wouldn't be enough. It was never enough. She sewed late into the night by candlelight, mending clothes for the saloon girls who paid her in coins and cast-off fabric. Her fingers bled from the needle, her eyes strained in the dim light, but she kept working. Emma grew thinner. Sarah watered down their milk, stretched their cornmeal with wild roots, but the child was always hungry. When Emma developed a cough that rattled in her small chest, Sarah spent their last dollar on medicine from the traveling doctor. "The girl needs better food, proper shelter," the doctor said, his voice not unkind. "This lean-to won't survive a Wyoming winter. You've got perhaps 3 weeks before the first real snow." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I know." 2 weeks before her bank payment was due, Sarah woke to find her remaining fence posts torn down and her 2 cows missing. She found them 3 miles away on Baxter's land, grazing behind his barn. She marched to his ranch house, Emma in tow, and hammered on his door. Baxter opened it himself, coffee cup in hand, his expression one of mock surprise. "Mrs. Mackenzie, what brings you here so early?" "My cattle are in your barn. I want them back." Baxter sipped his coffee. "Now, I don't know what you're talking about. Some strays wandered onto my property. Open range law says finders keepers for unclaimed livestock." "They're not unclaimed. They have my brand." "Had your brand, maybe. Hard to see brands on animals found on open range." His smile was cruel. "You've got no fence, no claim markers. For all I know, these are wild cattle I just happened to catch." Sarah's voice shook with fury. "You had your men tear down my fence. You drove my cattle here. This is theft." "Prove it." Baxter set down his cup. "Now get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." Sarah grabbed Emma's hand and turned away, but Baxter's voice followed them. "Offer's still open, Mrs. Mackenzie. $300 now. Price dropped since you're being difficult. Take it while you can." That night, Sarah sat by the dying embers of their cooking fire, staring at the few dollars she'd managed to save. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Emma slept fitfully beside her, her cough worsening in the cold autumn air. "I'm sorry, Thomas," Sarah whispered to the stars. "I don't know how to save what you built." The next morning brought rain, cold, penetrating, turning ash to black mud. Sarah was trying to waterproof their lean-to with salvaged canvas when hoofbeats splashed through puddles. Baxter again, but this time with 2 men Sarah recognized from the bank and the Territorial Land Office. "Mrs. Mackenzie." Baxter dismounted, producing papers from inside his coat. "I've purchased your debt from the bank. It's now due immediately, in full." $2,000, or this land transfers to me by end of business Monday. That's 3 days. Sarah's blood ran cold. You can't do that. I have until the end of the month. Could have, Baxter corrected, but I bought the note, and I'm calling it due. That's legal. Check with Mr. Peterson here if you doubt me. He gestured to the land office clerk, who nodded apologetically. This is extortion, Sarah said. This is business. Baxter's voice turned hard. You've been warned, Mrs. Mackenzie. I gave you fair offers. You refused. Now you'll lose everything, and you'll have no one to blame but your own stubborn pride. He remounted his horse. Monday, noon. If you're not gone by then, the sheriff will remove you. Sarah watched them ride away, her mind racing through impossible calculations. There was no way to raise $2,000 in 3 days. No way to save the ranch. No way to keep the promise she'd made to Thomas as he lay dying after his riding accident, his back broken, his hand gripping hers. Don't let them take it, Sarah. The water, it's worth everything. Promise me. She'd promised, and now she was about to break that promise. Saturday evening brought the first frost. Sarah was boiling thin soup over their fire when Emma suddenly pointed toward the eastern trail. "Mama, someone's coming." Sarah looked up to see a lone rider approaching through the dusk, his horse moving with the weary gait of an animal that had traveled far. The man was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by his hat brim. As he drew closer, Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the lean-to's support post. The stranger reined in his horse 20 feet away and raised both hands in a gesture of peace. "Mrs. Mackenzie? Sarah Mackenzie?" "Who's asking?" Sarah's voice was steady despite her pounding heart. "Name's Levi Thorne. I worked for your husband 7, 8 years back before he bought this land. I was his trail hand when he drove horses up from Texas." Sarah squinted at him in the fading light, then memory sparked. "Levi, you were just a boy then? Grew up some?" He dismounted stiffly, and Sarah could see he'd been riding hard. His clothes were dusty, his horse's flanks heaving. "Heard about the fire, about Baxter moving in. Rode 50 miles from the Triple Bar to get here." "Why?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "What business is it of yours?" Levi removed his hat, revealing a weathered face younger than his eyes suggested. Perhaps 30, with the kind of quiet strength that came from years of hard work rather than years of age. "Thomas saved my life once. Pulled me out of a river during a flash flood when I was green and stupid. I owed him. Reckon I owe you now." "I don't take charity," Sarah said, not offering any. Levi's voice was matter-of-fact. "I'm here to buy your land." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You and Baxter both. Every vulture in Wyoming seems to want burned ground." "I'm not Baxter." Levi pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag, heavy with the clink of coins. "I'm offering $4,000, cash, right now." Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. That's more than the land's worth, even before the fire. Why would you pay so much for ruins?" "Because it's not ruins." Levi's eyes were steady. "Because I know what Thomas knew, and because Baxter can't have it. I don't understand. Don't need to, not yet." Levi gestured to the pouch. "But we need to do this legal tonight. You know anyone in town who can witness a land transfer?" Sarah thought of Mr. Peterson, the land office clerk, but dismissed it. He was in Baxter's pocket. Then she remembered. "Old Henry, the mail carrier, he's heading through tomorrow morning. He's bonded with the territory. His witness signature holds. Then we wait for him." Levi looked at their meager camp, at Emma shivering despite the fire. "Meanwhile, you've got anything to eat? I've got supplies on my pack horse." That night, for the first time in weeks, Emma fell asleep with a full belly. Levi had brought cornmeal, bacon, coffee, and dried apples, provisions he shared without comment or expectation of gratitude. Sarah watched him across the fire, trying to reconcile this capable man with the 16-year-old boy she dimly remembered from years ago. "Why did you really come?" she asked when Emma was asleep. Levi was quiet for a long moment. "Thomas talked about this place like it was sacred ground. He told me once on a cold night, not unlike this, that he'd found something here worth more than gold. Said if anything ever happened to him, someone needed to make sure it stayed protected." He met Sarah's eyes. "I'm making good on that." "There's more to this than you're telling me." "Yes." Levi didn't elaborate, and Sarah found herself trusting his silence more than she'd trusted anyone's words in months. Old Henry arrived at dawn Sunday, his mule packed with mail bags. He was a wizened man who'd carried messages across Wyoming for 30 years, his word respected across 3 territories. When Levi explained what was needed, Henry's shrewd eyes took in the situation quickly. "Baxter's been sniffing around this place, hasn't he?" Henry spat tobacco juice. "Figures. Man's got more greed than sense." They gathered in what had been Sarah's kitchen, now just a square of foundation, stones, and ash. Henry produced official papers from his saddlebag, legal forms he carried for exactly this kind of emergency transaction. Sarah signed with a trembling hand, transferring ownership to Levi Thorne for the sum of $4,000. Levi counted out the money slowly, making sure Henry witnessed each bill and coin. $2,000 went directly to settle the bank debt, with Henry promising to deliver it personally to Baxter's hands. The remaining $2,000 Levi handed to Sarah. "This is too much," Sarah protested. "After paying the debt, I only need—" "You need a winter home for you and your girl," Levi interrupted. "You need food, medicine, clothes. You need a buffer against whatever comes next. Take it." Henry finished notarizing the documents, making 3 copies, one for the land office, one for Levi, one for Sarah. "This is ironclad," he said. "Anyone tries to dispute it, they'll answer to territorial law." After Henry left, Sarah stood staring at the money in her hands, more cash than she'd ever held at once. "What happens now? You own the land. Do you want me to leave?" Levi looked genuinely surprised. "Leave? Hell no! I need you to stay." "Why?" "Because I'm going to rebuild this ranch, and you're going to manage it." Levi walked to where the barn had stood, his boots crunching through charcoal. "You know this land. You know what grows here, what doesn't. You know the grazing patterns, the water cycles, the weather signs. I don't. I've been a trail hand and a ranch worker, but I've never run a spread of my own. I need someone who knows how to make this place work." Sarah's throat tightened. "You're offering me a job on my own land?" "It's not your land anymore," Levi said bluntly. "But it could be a partnership. I provide the capital and labor. You provide the knowledge and management. We split profit 60-40, my favor, since I'm taking the financial risk. But you and Emma have a home here as long as you want it." "That's—" Sarah struggled for words. "That's more than fair. That's generous. That's practical." Levi turned to face her. "Sarah, I didn't ride 50 miles to play savior. I came because there's something about this land that matters. something Baxter would destroy or exploit. Thomas knew it. I know it. And I think you know it too, even if you don't realize it yet. Monday noon brought Baxter and 4 of his ranch hands, all armed, ready to take possession of what they believed was now his land. They found instead Levi standing in front of the lean-to, a rifle cradled casually in his arms, the legal documents prominently displayed on a board nailed to a post. Baxter's face went purple as he read the transfer papers. "This is fraud. She sold to him to cheat me." "No fraud," Levi said calmly. "Legal sale, properly witnessed, fully paid. Check with old Henry if you doubt the signatures." "You paid off the debt with my own money. I was supposed to receive that payment when she defaulted." "She didn't default. The debt was settled before your deadline." Levi's voice remained level. "You've got no claim here, Baxter. Ride on." Baxter's hand moved toward his pistol, but Levi's rifle shifted almost imperceptibly. Behind Levi, Sarah emerged from the lean-to, her own rifle in hand, her face set with determination. Emma stood behind her mother, holding a heavy iron skillet like a weapon. One of Baxter's men muttered, "Boss, this ain't worth dying over." Baxter's eyes blazed with fury, but he was smart enough to recognize a losing position. "You'll regret this, Thorne. Both of you. I don't forget people who cross me." "Neither do I," Levi said quietly. "And you've got a long list of people you've wronged. Might want to think on that." After Baxter and his men rode away, Sarah lowered her rifle, her hands shaking with adrenaline. "He won't let this go. He'll find some way to hurt us." "Probably," Levi agreed, "which is why we need to move fast." That afternoon, Levi walked Sarah and Emma across the burned ground to where the ranch house had stood. He paced out measurements, counting steps, then stopped at a spot that seemed no different from any other patch of scorched earth. "Here," he said. "Thomas found it right here." "Found what?" Sarah asked. Levi knelt and brushed away ash and loose soil, revealing stone beneath, smooth, water-worn rock. "Help me clear this." They worked together, scraping away debris until a pattern emerged. Stones arranged in a circle, mortared together, capped with a heavy wooden cover that had been partially burned. Levi pried up the cover, and Sarah gasped. Below was a well opening, but not an ordinary well. Water glimmered perhaps 10 feet down, and even in the autumn drought, the water level was high. But more than that, Sarah could hear it, a deep susurrus like distant thunder, the sound of water moving through rock far below. "This isn't just a well," Levi said softly. "This is an artesian spring. The water's under natural pressure from underground. Thomas found it after drilling for months, hit it just right. It's why he was so careful about keeping the exact location quiet." Sarah stared at the water, understanding dawning. "This is why Baxter wanted the land. He knows about the spring. He knows there's water here, rare in this drought country, but he doesn't know exactly where, and he doesn't know it's artesian. Thomas only told a few people, and he swore us to secrecy. He knew if word got out, land grabbers would come from every direction." Levi looked at Sarah. "This spring could water 1,000 head of cattle, even in the worst drought. It could supply a whole town. It's worth a fortune." Sarah's mind reeled. "Thomas never told me. Why didn't he tell me?" "Protection, maybe. If you didn't know, you couldn't be forced to reveal it." Levi replaced the cover carefully. "But you need to know now, because this is what we're protecting. This is what we're going to build around." That evening, sitting by the fire, Levi laid out his plan. They would rebuild strategically, positioning the new buildings to hide the spring's location while allowing access. They would develop the land carefully, showing success, but not so much that it drew unwanted attention. They would make the ranch prosperous enough to defend itself against Baxter's schemes. "It'll take time," Levi warned. "A year, maybe two, before we're truly established. Baxter will push back. He'll try to find legal ways to challenge our ownership, or he'll try sabotage. We need to be ready." "We need evidence of his crimes," Sarah said. "The fence breaking, the cattle theft. If we can prove he's been operating illegally, we can get the territorial marshal involved." Levi nodded slowly. "You're thinking like a rancher now." "I was always a rancher," Sarah said firmly. "I just forgot for a while." The next weeks were a blur of activity. Levi hired workers from town, men who'd been unemployed or underemployed, grateful for honest wages. They began rebuilding, starting with a proper house for Sarah and Emma, then moving to barn and fencing. Sarah directed operations with growing confidence, her knowledge of the land proving invaluable. Meanwhile, she and Levi set their trap for Baxter. Sarah let it be known in town that she was struggling, that Levi's money was running out, that they might have to sell after all. She complained loudly at the general store that their remaining cattle kept disappearing, that someone was cutting their fences at night. Baxter took the bait. He sent his men to harass them, to drive off their small herd, to damage new construction. But this time, Sarah was ready. She'd hired two of Levi's most trusted friends to watch the property at night, hidden in positions where they could observe without being seen. They documented everything: dates, times, descriptions of Baxter's men, details of the damage done. The breakthrough came when one of Baxter's hands, drunk in the saloon, bragged about the fire that had started everything. Old man Baxter knew that widow had good water, told us to let the fire jump the creek, make sure her place burned good. The saloon keeper, who'd served Thomas Mackenzie for years and respected him, made note of the conversation and signed a statement. Combined with the evidence of ongoing harassment, it was enough to bring in the territorial marshal. Marshal James Henley rode in from Cheyenne, a granite-faced man with a reputation for fairness and an intolerance for land fraud. He interviewed witnesses, reviewed documents, and inspected the evidence. Baxter blustered and threatened, but Henley was unmoved. "Mr. Baxter, you've got two choices," Henley said in the marshal's office, with Levi and Sarah present as witnesses. "You can face trial for arson, destruction of property, cattle theft, and conspiracy, which will mean territorial prison if convicted, or you can pay full restitution to Mrs. Mackenzie and Mr. Thorne, return the stolen cattle, and agree to a court order preventing you from entering their property or interfering with their operations." Baxter's face was apoplectic, but his lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. The evidence was damning, and a trial would expose other questionable dealings. Reluctantly, Baxter agreed to terms. The restitution was substantial: $5,000 to cover damages, lost cattle, and emotional distress. The court order was ironclad, backed by territorial authority. Baxter was forced to publicly apologize in the town square, a humiliation that cost him more than money. "This isn't over," Baxter hissed to Levi as they left the courthouse. "You'll fail. That ranch will break you." "Maybe," Levi said, "but it won't break us." Spring came early to Wyoming that year, bringing rain that turned the grasslands green. The Mackenzie Thorne Ranch, as they'd named it, honoring both families, flourished. The artesian spring proved even more valuable than Levi had promised. Its water flowed steady and pure, allowing them to plant timothy grass and clover, creating rich pasture that drew cattle buyers from 3 territories. Sarah's knowledge of drought-resistant crops, learned from Thomas and refined through her own observations, transformed the ranch. She developed a rotation system that preserved soil moisture, planted native grasses that cattle loved, and created a network of water troughs fed by the spring that allowed them to manage grazing across all their land. Emma thrived. With good food and a warm house, her health returned. She followed Levi around like a devoted shadow, learning to ride, to rope, to read the weather signs. Levi taught her with patience and respect, treating her not as a child to be sheltered, but as a future rancher to be educated. "Your mama's the smartest person I know about this land," Levi told Emma one day as they mended fence. "You listen to her, learn from her. Someday, this ranch might be yours. Will you and Mama get married?" Emma asked with a child's directness. Levi paused, his hammer suspended mid-swing. "That's up to your mama. What do you think about it?" Emma considered seriously. "I think Papa would like you. You're kind, and you don't treat Mama like she's stupid, like Mr. Baxter did." "Your mama's the furthest thing from stupid I can imagine," Levi said quietly. Sarah overheard this exchange from where she was working on account books in the new house. That evening, after Emma was asleep, she found Levi checking the horses in the barn. "Levi," he turned, meeting her eyes. "Sarah, Emma asked if we're getting married." "I know. I should have talked to you first before—" "I'm not angry." Sarah stepped closer. "I'm thinking about it. I've been thinking about it for a while now." Levi set down the curry comb he'd been using. "Sarah, I need you to know, I didn't come here looking for a wife. I came to protect Thomas's legacy, but I've come to care for you, for Emma. This ranch feels like home in a way nowhere else ever has." "I love Thomas," Sarah said. "I still love his memory, but I'm not the same woman I was when he died. I'm stronger now, more sure of myself, and I think I could love you too, differently, but just as truly." Levi cupped her face gently. "I don't need you to love me the same way you loved him. I just need you to be willing to build something new together." They married in June, standing beside the spring that had saved them all, with Emma holding Sarah's bouquet and half the territory in attendance. Old Henry officiated, using his authority as a territorial official to bind them legally and his wisdom as an elder to bind them spiritually. These two have fought for this land, bled for it, protected it. Henry said to the assembled guests, "They understand that marriage, like ranching, isn't about perfect conditions. It's about working together when times are hard, celebrating together when times are good, and never giving up on each other or the land you've sworn to protect." Their marriage was tested sooner than expected. The following summer brought a drought that turned the grasslands brown and dried up wells across 3 counties. Cattle died by the hundreds as ranches ran out of water. Desperate ranchers began approaching Levi and Sarah, begging to buy water from their spring. "We could make a fortune," Sarah said, reviewing their options. "Sell water at premium prices." "We could," Levi agreed, "or we could remember what it's like to be desperate." They opened the spring to the community, charging only enough to cover the labor of hauling and distributing water. Ranchers brought their breeding stock to drink, keeping their herds alive through the driest months. Sarah organized a cooperative system where ranchers took turns helping with water distribution, creating a network of mutual support that strengthened the entire region. Baxter, his own wells dry, was forced to come begging. He arrived hat in hand, his pride clearly wounded. "I need water for my cattle. I'll pay whatever you ask." Levi and Sarah exchanged glances. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Same price as everyone else, but you'll work your turn on water distribution like every other rancher. No special treatment." Baxter's jaw worked, but he nodded. For 2 months, he worked alongside the men he'd once looked down on, hauling water under the blazing sun. It broke something in him, his arrogance, his sense of superiority. By the time the rains finally came in September, he was a different man, quieter and more thoughtful. At the drought's end, the ranchers gathered at the Mackenzie Thorne Ranch for a barbecue, celebrating survival. Baxter approached Sarah and Levi, awkward but determined. "I was wrong," he said simply, "about you, about this land, about what matters. I've spent my life grabbing and hoarding, and it's left me with not much that I'm proud of. You two shared when you didn't have to, helped people you didn't have to help, including me." He held out his hand. "I'm sorry for what I did, truly sorry." Levi shook his hand. "We accept your apology. But Baxter, if you ever threaten Sarah or our family again, apology or not, you'll answer to me." "Understood," Baxter said, "and deserved." 5 years after the fire, the Mackenzie Thorne Ranch was the most prosperous in Wyoming territory. They ran 800 head of cattle, supplied water to 40 families during dry seasons, and had become a model for sustainable ranching practices. Sarah's innovations in drought-resistant grazing had been adopted across the territory, saving countless ranches from failure. Emma, now 10 years old, could ride as well as any cowboy and keep ranch accounts better than most adults. She'd started a small business raising chickens, investing the profits in her own breeding stock, with the goal of eventually running cattle of her own. One evening, Sarah and Levi sat on the porch of their house, a solid 2-story structure built from local stone and timber, watching the sunset paint the grasslands gold. "Thomas would be proud," Sarah said quietly, "of the ranch, of Emma, of what we've built." "He'd be proud of you," Levi corrected. "You could have given up. Most people would have. But you held on just long enough for help to arrive." Sarah leaned against him. "You did more than help. You saved us. That one word you whispered, spring, changed everything." "The spring was always there," Levi said. "Thomas found it, you protected it, I just reminded you what you were fighting for. We all played our part. And now? Now we keep building. We teach Emma. We help our neighbors. We protect this land for the next generation." Levi kissed the top of Sarah's head. "We live the legacy Thomas started, and you refused to let die." In town, people no longer whispered about the widow Mackenzie. Instead, they spoke with respect about Sarah Thorne, the woman who'd stood against Baxter's greed, who'd survived fire and drought, who'd turned burned ground into the most productive ranch in 3 territories. Her story became legend, not because she was perfect or extraordinary, but because she was determined, knowledgeable, and willing to fight for what mattered. The artesian spring still flowed beneath the ranch house, its waters pure and cold, feeding the land and the cattle and the people who'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in acres owned, but in communities sustained, in knowledge shared, in helping hands extended, even when, especially when, you had little to spare. On her wedding day, Sarah had planted a cottonwood sapling beside the spring house, small and fragile. 5 years later, it stood 15 feet tall, its leaves whispering in the evening breeze. Emma loved to climb it, perching in its branches to watch the cattle graze and the grasslands roll away to distant mountains. "Mama," Emma called down one day, "why did you plant this tree here?" Sarah looked up at her daughter, silhouetted against the blue Wyoming sky. "To remember, sweet girl, to remember that even in the darkest times, even when everything seems burned and ruined, life finds a way to grow back stronger. That tree started as nothing but a stick and a dream. Now look at it." Emma climbed down and hugged her mother fiercely. "I'll never sell this place, Mama. Not ever, even when I'm old." "Good," Sarah said, smiling through sudden tears. "Because this isn't just land, Emma. It's a promise. Your father made it to me. I made it to Levi. And we're making it to you. Protect the water, share it when you can, and never forget that the real value of this place isn't what's on the surface. It's what runs deep beneath, sustaining life even when the world above is burning." The sun set over the Mackenzie Thorne Ranch, painting everything gold and amber, the grasslands rippling like ocean waves, cattle lowing softly as they settled for the night. Inside the house, lamps were lit, casting warm light through windows. The smell of Sarah's cooking drifted across the yard. Pot roast and fresh bread, simple food made rich by the knowledge that they had enough, that they were safe, that they had built something worth protecting. Levi rode in from checking the far pasture, dismounted, and swept Emma up in his arms, making her shriek with laughter. Sarah watched them, her heart full, thinking of Thomas and knowing that somehow, impossibly, everything had turned out exactly as it should. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. The spring whispered beneath them, eternal and giving, its waters flowing on toward futures they couldn't imagine, carrying with them the story of a widow who refused to break, a cowboy who rode 50 miles to honor a debt, and a child who would grow up knowing that courage and knowledge and stubborn love could overcome even the most devastating fires. Above them, the Wyoming stars blazed in their millions, ancient and cold and beautiful, watching over the grasslands as they had for eons, as they would for eons to come. And beneath those stars, on a ranch built from ash and hope, a family slept peacefully, protected by water and wisdom and the unbreakable bonds they'd forged in fire.